Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip in New York, and I want to get right to it tonight. One of Donald Trump's vice presidential contenders, Congressman Byron Donalds, he made some comments that has a lot of you talking and a lot of Democrats fired up. I'm going to speak with him live in just a couple of minutes. But
I don't want to think that chatter meant that in like a mean way, but it still comes across as a threat. Like, one day I hope I'll hear from you in Israeli news. Like, I don't think he meant it as a threat.
Here are the original remarks. They were made as a part of a pitch to black voters in Philadelphia, and I want you to hear it in its full context. Listen.
I grew up with my mom. My dad and my mom, things didn't work out. As an adult, I look at my father and I say, bro, I don't know what happened, but you my father and I love you.
Wow.
I don't know what happened. I wasn't there.
Wow.
But I'm gonna tell you this. Growing up, the one thing I knew I wanted to do, and this is not about my father, this is about what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be a father to myself.
Wow.
And so one of the things that's actually happening in our culture, which you're now starting to see in our politics, is the reinvigoration of black families with younger black men and black women. And that is also helping to breed the revival of a black middle class in America. You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together.
That's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were.
Yeah, things were so much better, dude. It's like, how come he gets to say that? But when I say it, people say I'm a white supremacist. Things were so much better during Jim Crow. Interesting statement.
Not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then HEW, Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are. What's happened in America the last 10 years, and I say it because it's my contemporaries, it's Wesley's contemporaries, you're starting to see more black people be married in homes, raising kids. It's when you home with your wife raising your kids, and then you look at the world, you're saying, now wait a minute, time out. This does not look right. How can I get something to my kids? It goes back to the conversation of generational wealth. Not just having a job, generational wealth.
Now, we should note that many Democrats who jumped on Donalds today claimed that he said that blacks were, quote, better off. As you heard there.
The best part about the shit take is that he has a wife, white wife, lol. He would have been maidenless in his picture perfect past. Yeah, I don't really understand how that works out in the Jim Crow South. Like how do you maintain your interracial relationship? How do you maintain this nuclear family that you want to defend in the Jim Crow South when you have a white wife?
He didn't use those exact words in the clip, but the congressman joins me now to talk about that. Congressman, thank you for being here. I want to just focus on really the substance of what you were saying or trying to say in that clip. What did you mean by black families were more together during Jim Crow?
Frankly, what that is about the empirical fact that before the Great Society, before Lyndon Johnson's policy.
I wonder if anything happened after Jim Crow that like gutted black neighborhoods and black communities and further continued America's white supremacist agenda. Like we should ask Byron what he thinks about the war on drugs, for example. Just like was there a thing that happened that continued that exact same white supremacist attitude? It's like, oh, there's an empirical fact that like the black nuclear family was intact during Jim Crow. Yeah, dude, when a black person wasn't being lynched, I guess, for existing in a white space.
There was more black families united. The marriage rate in black America was significantly higher before the Great Society. The period of time that coincides with that, obviously, is Jim Crow era. And then after,
he's too green to fucking make the Thomas Sowell argument. Like, he's not even doing a good job. This is, by the way, a classic trope, like a super classic black conservative weapon in the arsenal, which is welfare destroyed black families. That's like what he's trying to get to. But because he's too stupid, he said, oh, things were better during Jim Crow. And of course, everyone is immediately going to be like, what the are you saying? The real way to say that is by masking it with pro-capitalist, anti-social safety net rhetoric. You know, the whole, what's the guy's name again? The dude that worked with Reagan and Nixon in the 60s. You could say the N-word, and then, you know, you couldn't say the N-word no more. So you started saying welfare queens and whatnot. Lee Atwater. Yeah. Like he hasn't gotten the memo, I think. He hasn't read enough black conservative literature. I could clap him. Yes.
To the Great Society, the marriage rate in the black community plummeted significantly. The Great Society is a part of that reason, not completely, but it's definitely a part of that. And what you're seeing right now in America is a
It's like, dude, this is almost as insane as saying, like, I mean, this is even more unhinged than what Byron is saying, but it's like saying during chattel slavery, the shelter rate for black Americans was 100%. It's like not all that different from what's his face, Ben Carson being like, a lot of African Americans came here on boats as immigrants, as undocumented immigrants. It's so stupid. Yeah. Every black person was housed during, during chattel slavery. Every black person had a job during chattel slavery. Things were great. It's like, dude, what the
formation of black families in America. That's a good thing, not only for the black community and for black families, but it's also a good thing for the country.
So what was the point of tying together the black family and Jim Crow specifically? I mean, Jim Crow, as you know, was a period of racial segregation, of racial terror. Why would you make that connection?
All I was doing was referring to the time periods when you talk about the historical timelines in America and coinciding with black families and what the marriage rate in black families are.
Oh shit, my bad. We just misunderstood. Yeah, like just like Taylor Swift said, she wishes she could go back to the 1830s, but without all the races. That's what he was saying. He was saying, dude. He was saying he wishes he could go back to the Jim Crow era without the racism. That's what it is. Shit. Are you always eating, Big Mac? I'm not even eating right now. What's wrong with you?
The overarching point is obviously talking about what polling
I'm drinking water, dude. What the It's just water.
Shows today that about 25% of the black vote, depending on what poll you're looking at, is leaning towards supporting Republicans and supporting President Trump. The corollary to that is that when you're in a family unit, husband and wife, living together, working together, thriving together, you're raising your kids, your thought process is now talking about building generational wealth. What am I leaving to my children? What kind of communities do I want my children to come up in? What are the educational opportunities? What's going on with the economy? How does, and then to a broader level, how does foreign policy and all these other public policy issues flow into that? And so when you compare the terrible agenda of Joe Biden and what that's done to families in America, coinciding with the fact that you are seeing a reformation of black families in America today, which is an absolutely wonderful thing and needs to continue, my view is it also coincides with a more conservative leaning and a more conservative mindset politically in those families.
One thing I really want to just get you to address is there were a lot of people who heard what you had to say, and a lot of them are offended by the idea that you would repeat Jim Crow 3 times in your comments as if to suggest that that was a time period because that black families were, in your words, together, because in your words, black people were not just more conservative, they voted more conservatively. That's a good thing. I mean, it sounds like nostalgia. Do you regret using that time frame?
Bro said it 3 times trying to summon him. Yeah, he thought it was like a Beetlejuice method. If he says it 3 times, you can go back to the prosperous time for American black folk, the Jim Crow era.
It's a reference?
Nobody ever made nostalgia. That was never the point. It wasn't even about that. So where now I'm gonna get my backup is I didn't say that. I didn't even insinuate that. That is where the media and yes, Hakeem Jeffries and a lot of other people are taking
What exactly didn't you insinuate?
No, back up.
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. What didn't you insinuate?
The premise of your question, I did not insinuate. That is what people are trying to weave into what I said. What I said is crystal clear. It's on my social media. Go to @Byron Donalds on X. You can see the full clip. Abby, I appreciate you playing the full clip. What you are dealing with right right now is a political environment where now anything I might say or any major surrogate might say is going to be twisted into the lens of race. That was never the point, not the idea
I just want to,
whatsoever.
just to clarify my questioning of you.
Sure.
I understand that this idea that you said it was better, you didn't use the words better, but when you talk about that time period, you're suggesting that because the black family was together, they were better off than they are now.
See, this is the problem, Abby.
So are you saying that that's not the case? That the black family was not better off when they were, in your words, together?
Abby, let me put it to you like this.
In the Jim Crow era.
Yeah, my comments on Jim Crow are being twisted into being about race. I don't understand. I simply was saying things were much better for Jewish people, in and around the 40s and the lead up to the 1940s in Germany. A lot of people found a shared purpose, a sense of community. Like, what do you mean? What? Why are you saying that this has anything to do with the Holocaust, even though I did bring that up by name? What do you mean? Why would you bring up the fact that I kept saying Jim Crow?
Let's agree on something. I am, obviously one of the better communicators in the Republican Party. I know how to put words together.
Wait, that makes it worse, dude. That means that you had intention behind it. Like it wasn't a oopsie. That literally makes it worse. He's like, listen, Abby, I know what the I'm saying. That's why I said Jim Crow era was better for black people 3 times. For the family. The black family, of course. That's awesome.
Do it very, very often. So I'm not going to say something that I do not agree with. What America is seeing right now, especially black America, is the gaslighting that unfortunately does happen in politics.
Oh, now he's vaguely pointing the finger at woke culture.
My comments, and you want to weave your own political viewpoint into what I said.
I
said is very clear.
I asked you to explain because I wanted to
what
I want to undo is understand what you're saying.
For the record, if you're wondering why the are we talking about Representative Byron Donalds, it's not just because he's like said some unhinged shit. It's also because why is he saying unhinged shit? Now, under normal circumstances, you would go, well, he's saying unhinged shit because he is a black conservative, he's a black Republican. This is kind of the modus operandi. This is it's to, traffic white supremacist talking points with a black face and give permission to be able to say things that like white politicians would get probably a little penalized for, you know what I mean? Because like things were great for blacks during Jim Crow. Coming out of Trump's mouth is now that I think about it, is something he probably will say, but is going to be understandably criticized as white supremacist sentiment. Now, but beyond the reasons, Byron is on the short list. Okay, he is one of Trump's VP pick. That is why this is getting more media coverage than it normally would.
Saying here because. If you're making a comparison, you're saying the black family was together then, they're not together now. And
listen, Abby, I think you need to understand, I am trying to become the vice president as a black man to the Republican Party, the modern Republican Party, very different than the Abraham Lincoln Republican Party. So for that reason, I have to say some of the most white supremacist things you've ever heard in your entire life. You know how like Barack Obama had to bring Joe Biden on board so that white people who were terrified of a Kenyan Muslim man becoming president with a middle name Hussein would feel comfortable because there was an old racist guy next to him, like an old racist white guy. It's kind of like that. Right now, as I stand here, I look black. I am black. And that's very scary for a lot of people who would otherwise vote for Donald Trump because they're white supremacists. So I need to effectively communicate to them that I'm black, but also a white supremacist myself.
And you're using that to try to say that things are bad now. Well, first of all, let me just to set the table here, by pretty much every available measure, black families, black individuals in this country are better off today than they were during Jim Crow. Would you agree with that?
Abby, of course I would. I'm not making that point, and this is the problem. What the Democrats, what Hakeem Jeffries did on the House floor, what Jamie Harrison, what the president of the NAACP, what the Biden campaign, because they're the ones who started this, it was really the Biden campaigns who were trying to cherry pick everything. They're trying to twist my words into saying something. I never said said that. What I was talking about was specifically black families.
You don't have to go as far back as Obama. It's the same thing with Biden and Kamala. Yes, a role reversal of the Obama-Brandon camp with the Biden-Kamala camp.
And the point that black families being together is a great thing for the black community. And you do have to acknowledge.
It's cool because like Abby Phillips literally played the whole clip and like tried to contextualize it to a degree that I think is like almost carrying water for Byron Donalds.
Acknowledge the empirical fact that before Lyndon Johnson's policies and the welfare state.
That's the issue. Do you understand, chatters? He didn't do the classic Thomas Sowell black conservative take of masking the quiet part. Things were better for black people under Jim Crow. Normally that's the quiet part. You're not supposed to say that out loud. Thomas Sowell, will say it's the welfare state that destroyed the black community. Thomas Sowell and Clarence Thomas love saying not the quiet part out loud, but the other part. He unfortunately telegraphed the racist part of that argument. He swapped it, and now he's kind of stuck. And I don't know why he's not. Big man, are you drinking from a disposable plastic bottle? Yes, bro. I hate the environment.
That was created in the United States. I'm not talking about good, bad, or indifferent.
But what about
black families were, black marriage rates were significantly higher.
Well, what
They're
about other
rising
things that
again
might
in
have,
America. That's a good thing. We should celebrate
other things that may have contributed to the, maybe the decline in marriage rates, which, by the way, is not unique to black families. That's happening actually across racial groups. But what about other things? I mean, what about redlining? Do you think that that had an effect on the black family? What about mass incarceration? What about the war on drugs, which was pushed by a Republican president whose advisor said it was specifically to target black people? What about all of those things?
Look, if you want to talk about redlining and a lot of the other policies that were put forward, quite frankly, by the Democrat Party, if you're going to go back to Jim Crow, because Jim Crow was Democrat policies.
Well,
that's what that was.
I know that you know
Abby,
this.
Don't cut me off when I'm trying to make a point.
Let me just,
Abby.
I have to correct a factual point here. I know that you know that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party of today are ideologically not what they were during Jim Crow. You know that, Congressman. So to suggest that, the Democrats of 1920 are the same ideologically as the Democrats of today is inaccurate. So just, you can continue, but I wanted to...
That's not totally true, Abby, and I think if we want to have that conversation about the policy positions between Republicans and Democrats, we can have that conversation, but
one of the other
Abby, do you want to have a conversation?
One of the other things,
I'm trying to understand how you want this interview to go.
Since you brought it up on the conservative thing, the other thing that you said was black people voted more conservatively. Were you talking about them voting for Republicans?
In part, yeah, because...
Well, I mean, if we're talking about the Jim Crow era, I don't think black people were voting conservatively. I don't think black people were voting at all. That's an odd take in and of itself.
Because that's just an empirical fact. That's what we know. That did happen. And the only corollary that I am making is that when families are together and now you're trying to find a way for you to build wealth within your family unit, you're thinking about public policy in a myriad of ways. Because at the end of the day, you want your children to be able to stand on your shoulders. I was very, very fortunate. My mother was able to build a platform for me to be able to stand on and to be able to achieve. Same for my sisters. I'm a very blessed individual because of that. My only point is that when you have a family unit, husband and wife living together, striving together, grinding together, raising children together, you start thinking about public policy in a myriad of ways. And my belief is that dynamic allows people to start thinking about public policy in a much more conservative way as opposed to a much more progressive way. That's my point.
That might be, I mean, I think you're a Republican, so you're entitled to that opinion. But I think what people are taking issue with is you made a couple of statements of fact. And one of the things I was asking you about whether you were talking about black people voting for Republicans. In the time period that you're talking about, the LBJ time period, they started voting for Democrats. And the reason is because of civil rights, because a Democratic president was passing bills that gave them rights. The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the Housing Fairness Act. So do you acknowledge that when Democrats black voters vote for Democrats, it's actually because there's a history there. There's a reason that they voted for Democrats in that time period, not because they were just getting welfare money.
Abby, let me be clear. I don't deny that. I think it's also important for the record to be clear that you had the vast majority of Democrats in the Senate were filibustering the 64 Civil Rights Act led by Robert Byrd, who, by the way, was a mentor to Joe Biden when he went into the United States Senate. So if we're going to...
This is the long way to do the whole, like, this is the long way to do the party realignment never happened. And also that that actually Democrats are the real racists still. Oh, he did it already? He said that already? Oh, I missed it. I was pissing. Yeah, no Southern, no shift.
We're going to talk about the history. Let's talk about it clearly.
Abby had to help him with the welfare thing? Yeah.
Completely. Republicans have been the ones who were pushing not just the 64 Civil Rights Act, but the other 4 Civil Rights Acts that occurred before 1964.
Look,
that's the history of the country.
The Democrats,
I'm not denying
there
that.
were Southern Democrats
Abby,
who
can
opposed,
I finish my point?
Again,
All I'm asking is to finish my point.
On the
Abby.
facts here, there were Southern Democrats who opposed these civil rights bills, but
yes, that's
a majority
correct.
of them voted for it. It was also led by a Democratic president. So you acknowledge that Southern Democrats were recruited into the Republican Party in the time period after that. So when you talk about this, you just have to acknowledge that there's been a switch happening in the two parties. It's not the same today as it was during Jim Crow. And so when you say that black people voted conservatively, that actually doesn't really tell us anything. It just tells us that they voted for the Republican Party, which is a different thing than it is for today.
Are we also going to acknowledge that how the 64 Civil Rights Act actually got through the U.S. Senate was because of also the leadership of Senator Everett Dirksen, who was the minority Republican leader in the United States Senate at that time.
Absolutely.
You have to acknowledge that. So I think if we're going to talk about this, we have to acknowledge all of the history that went along with it.
I wasn't suggesting
and I think that's a good thing. We should have that historical conversation.
I wasn't suggesting that congressional Republicans necessarily were the stumbling block for any of this legislation. All I'm saying is that when you ask, why do black people vote for Democrats, you have to acknowledge that that is one of the main reasons. I want to just ask one other thing, though, Congressman. It's striking to me that this conversation about the family, about who is the recipient of government benefits, about who was affected by Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society, why is it that that conversation only happens to black people?
Great question. Are you perhaps saying that it's the same as the culture argument, by the way? Is there something in the mind of the black American that somehow the welfare apparatus targets differently than the white American? Is there something in the black mind that you're implying is different than the white mind that is impacted by rap music? Because racists love saying, no, it's just a culture. It's just a culture thing. It's a cultural difference. That's why black people are violent or whatever the and it's like, well, more white people listen to rap music than black people. What's that about?
White people are on welfare. When white people are recipients of these programs too, when white people have broken families as well, why is this a message that is always directed at black Americans?
I didn't say that at all. I think that's what you're insinuating. But let me.
I mean, that's what you did.
No, he did say that. You said exactly verbatim those words. What you mean you didn't say that? You literally did. Like, you used exactly those words, man.
You were trying to recruit black voters for President Trump.
Am I allowed to answer the question? Let me step into that. Okay, a couple of things. Yes, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, if you look at the empirical data, was destructive in part, and I said even in my comments yesterday in Philadelphia, in part to black families throughout the United States of America. You also had some of the very damaging policies around the criminal justice system. The 94 crime bill, which was authored by Joe Biden and brought.
He's like, the crime panic that Democrats capitulated to was a direct consequence of, by the way, this is such a perfect study. The crime panic was created directly by the Republican Party, and the Democrats went along with it willingly, including the crime bill that Joe Brandon supported and authored. Okay. Now that's really interesting because it feels to me like we are going through that same exact panic right now with the border bill. It feels like Democratic capitulation to right-wing framing on issues because they don't really give a shit about any real policies or the outcome is genuinely devastating for the material conditions of all the people that it targets. And beyond that, Republicans can stand and posture as though you are responsible for it. How odd. How interesting.
By Joe Biden. Yes, you had the war on drugs that was also very damaging to black communities. All those things have contributed to that. And where where we are.
The crime bill wasn't, and crime panic was not just the Republican Party freaking out. Many white liberals absolutely went along with that narrative in the 90s. No, I agree. I know. And that is exactly what's happening with the immigration shit right now. That is exactly what's going on with immigration. White liberals are panicking. And instead of the other side saying, hey, you got to be reasonable, what the are you doing? What are you saying right now about these immigrants like being responsible for so much crime or whatever? And addressing the actual truth of the matter, liberals are leaning into it.
Today in America is trying to have the economic policies and the public policies so that all people can thrive. And if you're actually going to compare economic policies and public policies between the 45th president and the 46th president, it's without question they were better under the 45th.
Well, look, I mean,
so if you're going to examine today,
the
hold on,
black
but Abby, if you're going to examine today in America and
again,
where
I'm gonna
we're
interrupt
going
you
as Americans, then you have to have the right set of economic policies and the right set of public policies. I mean, Abby, you've been interrupting me the entire interview. I'm just trying to have a conversation.
I'm going to interrupt you on the facts, Congressman. The black unemployment rate was the lowest in American history under Joe Biden just last year. The poverty rate for black people is the lowest under Joe Biden. So you cannot say empirically for black people that from a financial level, things were better under Trump. There are other ways that you can make this case, but you cannot say that.
Actually, let me respond to that. Because the economic reality is that even though unemployment might be lower, wages adjusted for inflation, which is the true measure of getting ahead in America, that has been bad under Joe Biden. It was significant.
Wow. Republicans become so woke. This guy is a real Marxist-Leninist over here when Joe Biden is the president. It's crazy.
Better under Donald Trump because we did not have massive inflation and people were making more money, which means you're taking more money home, which means you can begin to prepare for your family, which means you can start to prepare and begin thinking about ideas of getting assets, accumulating assets, and generating wealth. Joe Biden's economy, Bidenomics, like he likes to call it, I know they don't using the word anymore, that's been destructive of so many families in our country, including black families in our country. That is the empirical economic fact that we have to acknowledge before this election
inflation,
cycle.
I 100% agree with you, is a problem for all families, including maybe even especially black families. But you also cannot ignore that there are a lot of statistics that suggest that black Americans are doing well under Joe Biden, better than they were doing under Donald Trump. I want to ask you one last thing, because I know that this is actually happening as we're talking. We've learned that you are on the list, obviously, for VP candidates, and that you've received some vetting materials from the Trump campaign to be potentially a VP. Can you confirm that? And is there anything more you can tell us about how that process is going?
Well, I'm not going to confirm that right now. I had a conversation with the Trump campaign about that, and I'm going to leave that very private because they're going to go through their deliberations. President Trump's going to make a decision. I will say prices in America have been up over 20% since Joe Biden has taken office. That's hurting everybody. When prices are up 20%, trust me, Abby, going to the supermarket, going to the gas station, everybody is struggling. That is a fact. And that is why so many Americans, especially Americans who are minorities in this country, are leaving Joe Biden and the Democrats and looking towards Donald Trump and the Republicans.
All right. Congressman Byron Donalds, we appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mavs are getting cooked. What do? We have to save. Oh, shit. Somebody on MSNBC. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Joanne Reed cooked them.
Last question.
Which creates better people.
Last question, and then I'm going to let you go. Last question. We're out of time,
Sure,
but I'm going to give you one more question. During Jim Crow, could your family have existed? You are in an interracial marriage. Your wife is a white conservative activist. Could your family have existed at all during Jim Crow?
No, it could not, Joy. We all know that. But that's why I am blessed to live in America today as opposed to America during that time. But we cannot ignore the realities of not having fathers in homes. That is important for Black people today and all people today as we move forward for a better America.
We are out of time. What I'm grateful for is that we do not live in the Jim Crow era and that fathers do not face the threat of lynching.
I'm very grateful of that.
Perhaps don't bring up Jim Crow when you're trying to make that example. Representative Byron Donalds, thank you for being here, and we'll be right back.
God damn, she cooked his ass, bro. Yeah, we got to get back to the Jim Crow to bring families together is just like such a weird take.